I just found out my wife of 10 years secretly transferred $250, $0 from our joint account to her lover's offshore account. And now she's claiming I have no right to the property because she's filing for divorce. What should I do? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing out my life story like this, but here I am. My wife and I had been together for 10 years. We seemed like the perfect couple, happy, stable, with a house, 2 kids, a good life. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs I ignored, small things that didn't sit right, but I convinced myself I was overthinking. It all started about 2 months ago. Began working late more often. She'd say it was just extra hours at her job. She's in marketing, and her company had some big campaign. But her phone became more secretive. She'd hide her texts, delete messages when I came into the room, and she started wearing these new expensive clothes I'd never seen before. I chalked it up to her just wanting to look good. I didn't suspect anything then. Then I noticed her bank statements. I was checking our joint account like I always do, just to keep track of expenses, when I saw an unusual transfer. It was a transfer of $250, $0, half of our savings, to an offshore account. I was stunned. I couldn't believe my eyes. I double-checked, thinking maybe it was a mistake, but the transaction was real. It was made 2 days ago, and the account was in the name of someone I didn't recognize. That's when I started digging. I looked into the account details, and it was linked to a guy named Jake. I looked him up online. He's some guy met at a conference last year. I remembered she came home that night acting a little weird, but I didn't push. I thought maybe she was just tired or stressed. Now I realized she was probably planning this entire thing. I confronted her about the money first. I asked her outright, "What's this transfer? Who is Jake and what's going on?" She smirked, that bitchy smirk she gets when she's trying to hide something. She told me, "Oh, it's just some investment. You know, I've been thinking about diversifying our portfolio. It's nothing." She lied so easily, like she was reading from a script. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she was doing her best to act innocent. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I kept thinking about the money, the secret meetings, the lies. The fact that she could take such a huge chunk of our savings and just blow it on some affair with Jake. I felt betrayed, humiliated, like I'd been punched in the gut. How many other lies had she told me? How long had this been going on? I felt a mixture of anger and sadness, like I'd lost the woman I thought I knew. The next morning I decided I needed answers. I sat her down, looked her straight in the eyes, and asked, "Have you been cheating on me? Are you with Jake?" She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're being paranoid. You always jump to conclusions. Jake is just a client. We're just friends. You're overreacting." But her voice was shaky and her hands trembled slightly. That's when I knew she was lying. I pressed her further, demanding the truth. She finally snapped back, "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing him, but it's not what you think. I needed someone to talk to, okay? You're so busy with work you don't pay attention. Jake is just a distraction. And the money, it's for us, for our future. I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how." She looked so convincing, so manipulative, that I almost believed her for a second. But I knew better. I could feel it in my gut. This was bigger than just a fling. It was betrayal on a scale I never saw coming. I sat there, stunned, feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with everything, turned out to be a liar, a thief, and a cheat. And she had the audacity to spin her lies with that fake, innocent look on her face. I didn't know what to feel first: anger, heartbreak, confusion. All I knew was that my world was crashing down around me, and I had no idea how I was going to pick up the pieces. After I confronted her, her reaction was both infuriating and predictable. She looked at me like I was the crazy one, like I was the one overreacting. "You're making a huge deal out of nothing," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You're just jealous because I've been working so hard and you're so insecure. Jake and I, it's just sex, nothing more. You're overthinking everything. Honestly, you're lucky I'm even still here talking to you." That's when I lost it. How could she be so callous, so dismissive of what she'd done? I felt the blood rushing to my head, my fists clenched. I told her, "You stole half our savings. You transferred $250, $0, to some guy you're sleeping with, and you expect me to just brush it off?" Her eyes narrowed. "It's not like that. I was going to tell you everything, but you never listen. You're always working, always busy. You don't give me any attention anymore. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." That was a lie, total bullshit. I'd been working long hours, yes, but I always came home to her. Always tried to be a good husband. And now I find out she's been sneaking around with Jake, stealing our money, and spinning some story. About neglect, I felt sick. I didn't even know how to respond. I just sat there staring at her, feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Over the next few days, I couldn't get her out of my head. I kept replaying the last conversation, trying to understand how she could be so cold, so manipulative. I started digging into her phone, her emails, her social media. Nothing too obvious at first, just little things that didn't add up. Secret texts, strange contacts, messages she deleted quickly when I came near. Every new piece of evidence made my stomach turn. Then I found something else. A series of emails between and Jake discussing the transfer of money. She had sent him instructions on how to access the offshore account, how to move the money around, how to hide it from me. The emails were detailed, almost like a business deal. That's when I knew this was no innocent affair. She was using me, using our life savings to fund her relationship with Jake. I felt like I'd been punched again, this time in the chest. A huge part of me wanted to scream, to break. Something to make her feel as small as she was making me feel. But I didn't. I kept calm, even though inside I was boiling with rage. I knew I had to keep my head clear if I wanted to do something about this. I started to plan. I wanted to catch her in the act, maybe find a way to expose her for who she really was. I couldn't trust her anymore. Everything she'd said, everything she'd done was a lie. And now I was left with the question, what do I do next? I decided I'd need proof if I was going to fight her legally. I started recording her calls, saving emails, gathering bank statements. I knew she'd try to spin this, try to manipulate the situation. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I also reached out to a lawyer I found online just to get an idea of my rights. The more I learned, the angrier I got. She was planning to file for divorce soon, claiming I was the one cheating, not her. The irony was sickening. She'd betrayed me, stolen our money, and now she wanted to leave me holding the bag. I also started thinking about how much I'd trusted her. For 10 years I believed in us, in our marriage. And now I realized I'd been living with a lie. The woman I thought I knew was a manipulative, selfish cheat, and I had to decide whether to fight for the marriage or cut my losses. But one thing was clear, she wasn't getting away with it, not without consequences. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. That's where I stand now. Still trying to process everything, still trying to figure out what's next. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust her again, but I do know I'll make damn sure she regrets this. Because no matter what she says, no matter how much she tries to lie her way out, I saw everything. And I will fight for what's rightfully mine, my dignity, my money, and my future. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. It's like peeling layers off an onion, and every layer revealed something worse. I started to realize that lies weren't just about the money or her affair with Jake. They were about control, manipulation, and a complete disregard for everything we built. Together, I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. One night I decided I needed to see her in action. I set up a hidden camera in the living room just in case she did something suspicious. I didn't plan to catch her doing anything explicit, at least not initially. I just wanted to see if she was sneaking around or meeting Jake again. I figured if I could get some proof, it'd be game over. I was tired of playing detective in the shadows. It was a nerve-wracking couple of days. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was meeting him or just running errands. Then finally, I caught her. She came home late one evening looking flushed and nervous. She was wearing that same expensive outfit I'd seen in her closet, the one she claimed was for work. But her phone kept buzzing and she kept glancing at it nervously. I watched her from behind the door, heart pounding. Then she got a text. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw her smile and respond, "I'll see you tonight," before slipping her phone into her purse. That was it. I knew she was meeting Jake again. I felt like my stomach sank. This wasn't just a fling. It was something much deeper, much darker. She was lying to me about everything. The next morning, I confronted her again, this time with the footage on my phone. I played it for her knowing she couldn't deny it. Her face went pale. She tried to play it off, acting innocent, saying, "That's not what you think, it's just sex, remember, it's not a big deal." But I wasn't buying it, not anymore. Her reaction was pure defiance. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "You've been working so much you don't even notice what's happening right under your nose. I needed someone who listens, who understands me. Jake does that. And the money, it's for us. For our future, damn it. I was going to tell you, I swear." Her words felt hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I looked her in the eyes and saw the lies. I saw the greed, the selfishness. I realized that no matter how much she lied or how convincing she was, I couldn't trust her anymore. She crossed a line I never thought she would. I felt the cold weight of betrayal pressing down on me, and I knew I had to make a decision. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the secret transfers, her meetings with Jake, her lies. I felt numb, exhausted. The woman I loved was now a stranger, someone I couldn't recognize. And the worst part, I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. But love doesn't survive betrayal like this. Not without consequences. In the days that followed, I reached out to a lawyer again. I wanted to know where I stood legally. Turns out, because of the transfer of such a large sum of money, I had a solid case for financial misconduct and potential fraud. I also learned that I could challenge her divorce filing, especially since she was trying to hide assets and manipulate the situation. It was a small victory, but it gave me some hope that I could fight back. Meanwhile, kept spinning her stories. She told friends she was under stress, that I was controlling, and that Jake was just a friend she was helping through a rough patch. She claimed she did take the money for herself but was investing in our future. I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes and the evidence I'd collected. She was trying to cover her tracks, but I was one step ahead. I also realized I couldn't stay in this house anymore. I packed a bag, took some of my most important belongings, and moved into a friend's place. It was a temporary measure, but I needed space to think, to breathe. I didn't want to be around her anymore, her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. I felt broken but determined to get through this. Now I'm at a crossroads. Do I fight for my marriage, try to save what's left of the trust, or do I cut my losses and walk away? Every day is of emotions, anger, sadness, hope, despair. But one thing I know for sure, I will not be a victim of her lies. I will stand my ground, fight for what's right, and make sure she faces the consequences of her actions. Because I deserve honesty, I deserve respect, and I refuse to let her destroy me completely. The days following my move out were some of the hardest I've ever experienced. I couldn't stop thinking about everything, the money, the lies, the betrayal. It felt like my world was collapsing around me and I was just standing there watching it fall apart. I kept replaying all the moments I missed, the signs I ignored, the times I thought she was just stressed or busy. Now I see it all clearly, was playing me from the start, and I was too blind to see it. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer trying to figure out my next move. The more we talked, the more I realized I had a lot of leverage. That huge transfer of money. It was evidence enough to challenge her divorce and her claims about the assets. I learned I could freeze her accounts and potentially get a court order to investigate her financial activity more thoroughly. But I also knew this was going to get messy fast. Meanwhile, was trying to spin her version of the story to friends and family. She told everyone I was the one cheating, that I was neglectful, and that she was just seeking comfort from Jake because I'd been so distant. She painted herself as the victim, the wronged wife. I couldn't believe how quickly she turned the narrative around. It made me realize just how manipulative and cunning she was. She was trying to control the story, to make herself look innocent while she continued her affair behind my back. I started gathering more concrete evidence. I had already saved her texts, emails, and the footage from the hidden camera. But I also hired a private investigator to look into Jake's background and his financial dealings. Turns out, Jake was no innocent businessman. He had a history of shady investments, offshore accounts, and even a few small lawsuits. That didn't surprise me, but it confirmed my suspicion that was involved in something much bigger than just a fling. The emotional toll was immense. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. I'd spent years building a life with her, trusting her with everything. And now I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd used me as a fool. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband, the guy who provided, who supported. But now, I felt like a chump, a sucker who'd been played from the start. Despite all this, I refused to give up. I knew I had to fight for my rights, for my dignity. I started preparing for court, gathering all the evidence I could find to prove her deceit. I also contacted a financial forensic expert to trace the money and see where it had gone. I had to be meticulous. If I was going to expose her, I needed irrefutable proof. One day, I received a call from my lawyer. She told me that was planning to file for divorce within the next week. She also planned to claim that I was the one cheating, trying to smear my name to avoid the fallout. That's when I realized her game was to turn the tables. She wanted to walk away with everything, including the house and the money, and pin her betrayal on me. I decided I wouldn't let her get away with it. I told my lawyer to prepare a counterclaim, challenging her divorce petition, requesting an investigation into the offshore account, and seeking a court order to freeze her assets. I also told her I was going to fight for full custody of the kids. I didn't want them to be caught in the crossfire, but I knew manipulations could hurt them if I didn't act. Meanwhile, I was trying to keep it together for my own sanity. I reached out to some friends, people I trust, for support. It's amazing how much you need someone to just listen when your entire world is falling apart. They told me to stay strong, to keep my head clear, and to focus on what matters. I knew they were right. I couldn't let her win, not this way. Every day I felt a mix of resolve and despair. I was hurt, yes, but also determined. I knew that if I played my cards right, I could come out of this stronger. I just had to keep fighting, stay disciplined, and never lose sight of what was true. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the system or me anymore. This was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine, my integrity, my money, and my future. I promised myself I wouldn't let her ruin everything I worked for, not without a fight. The courtroom preparations took over my life, every day. I was poring over documents, transcripts, and evidence, trying to build a case that would expose for who she really was. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply she'd planned this whole betrayal. The offshore accounts, the fake stories, her attempts to manipulate everyone around her. She was good at it, too good. But I was determined to outsmart her. I hired a financial forensic investigator, someone who specialized in offshore money trails. It was expensive, but it was worth every penny. Within days, he had traced the transfer of our $250, $0, and what he found was worse than I imagined. The money had been split into smaller amounts, moved through multiple shell companies, and now was spread across different accounts in the Caribbean, Switzerland, and some small European countries. It was clear she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. She used her own name at first, but then she switched everything to fake companies and offshore accounts to hide her tracks. Meanwhile, was trying to play the victim, claiming I was the one cheating, that I had been distant and controlling. She insisted that Jake was just a business contact, and that the money was an investment in our future. She even had the nerve to say I was the one who was paranoid, that I was making her life miserable. It was sickening how she could lie with such ease, how she could spin her web of deceit and expect me to buy it. I kept all the evidence close, texts, emails, bank statements, the investigators' reports. I also recorded her phone calls, catching her in more lies. One day, I overheard her talking to a friend, bragging about how she was going to get rid of him and walk away with everything. Hearing that made my blood boil. She was openly admitting her plans, and I had it all recorded. I knew then that I had enough to go to court and expose her. The legal fight was brutal. Filed for divorce, claiming I was unfaithful, trying to get full custody of the kids, and claiming she was entitled to most of our assets because she was the primary caregiver. But I had the evidence to show her true motives, her affair, her money laundering, her lies. My lawyer advised me to request a court order to freeze her assets and to subpoena her financial records. I also filed for a protective order because I was worried she might try to manipulate or intimidate me further. As the court date approached, S's facade started to crack. She became more aggressive, more desperate. She started accusing me of everything, saying I was abusive, controlling, unfaithful, but I had nothing to hide. I was just telling the truth, and I had the evidence to back it up. I could see the panic in her eyes when she realized I was serious about exposing her. One day, she confronted me directly in front of the lawyer. She yelled, "You're ruining everything. I was going to leave quietly, but now you're ruining my life. You're just jealous because I found someone better. Jake is the only one who truly cares about me." She looked so furious, so bitter. I wanted to punch her, but I kept my composure. I simply said, "You lied, cheated, and stole from me. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done. You're not getting away with this." That moment was a turning point. I realized I couldn't keep living in this nightmare. I had to take control, no matter how painful it was. I was going to fight for my rights, for my dignity, and for my children. I knew lies wouldn't hold up in court, and I had enough proof to show her true character. The day of the hearing finally arrived. I was nervous, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I'd done everything I could to prepare. As I sat in the courtroom, looking at her sitting there trying to act innocent, I knew that the truth was on my side. The judge listened to the evidence, the testimonies, and the recordings. It was clear had been manipulative, dishonest, and criminally reckless with our money. When the judge finally made his ruling, I felt a wave of relief. He ordered her to provide full disclosure of all accounts, froze her assets, and awarded me custody of the children. She was furious, screaming and crying, but I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. Justice was finally being served. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this nightmare. I learned that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But I also learned that honesty and integrity matter more than anything. I won't let anyone manipulate me again. I've come out of this stronger, wiser, and more cautious. And for anyone else going through something similar, trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because sometimes, the only way to truly get justice is to take control and refuse to be a victim anymore. The aftermath was a whirlwind I didn't quite expect. After the court's decision, S's facade crumbled completely. She tried to spin more stories, but the judge's ruling and the evidence I presented left no room for her lies. She was ordered to pay back the stolen money, and her attempts at manipulating the situation only made her look worse in front of everyone involved. For me, it was a relief, finally, some sense of closure. But it wasn't easy. The emotional scars ran deep. Trust, once shattered, doesn't heal overnight. I found myself haunted by memories of what I thought was a perfect life, what I thought was a marriage built on love and mutual respect. Now, I see it for what it really was, a carefully constructed illusion, one maintained for her own gain. The most difficult part was explaining everything to the kids. They were young, too young to understand all the details, but they could sense the tension, the change in our household. I sat them down and told them that Mommy and Daddy needed some time apart, that everything was going to be okay. I promised I'd always be there for them, no matter what. It broke my heart to see their confused faces, but I knew honesty was the only way forward. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started therapy, not just to handle the emotional fallout, but to learn how to trust again. I realized that betrayal had left me, but it also taught me a lot about myself, about my strength, my boundaries, and what I truly deserve. I also took steps to protect myself financially. I closed the offshore accounts, set up new banking arrangements, and made sure I had control over my own money. Looking back, I see this experience as a brutal but necessary wake-up call. It revealed the dark side of a marriage I thought was unbreakable. It also showed me that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail for your dignity, your assets, and your future. That betrayal didn't define me. What I did afterward did. I've learned that honesty, no matter how painful, is always better than lies. That some people will manipulate and deceive for their own benefit, and you have to be ready to stand up and fight back. I've come to understand that love isn't enough when trust is broken. Sometimes, Walking away is the only way to preserve your sanity and your self-respect. Now I focus on my kids, my career, and rebuilding the piece of myself that was lost during this ordeal. I don't hold grudges, at least I try not to. I forgive not for her sake, but for mine. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the poison of bitterness. I know I will move forward stronger and wiser, carrying the scars but also the lessons. The biggest takeaway I want to share is this: never ignore the small signs. Trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't dismiss it. Gather evidence, protect yourself, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right, even if it means facing the harsh truths about someone you loved. Because in the end, surviving betrayal isn't just about winning in court or recovering stolen money, it's about reclaiming your life and dignity. And that's a victory worth fighting for.